The air in the restaurant's back kitchen was perpetually stifling. Scalding steam mixed with the greasy aroma of food wrapping around me like an invisible net until I could barely breathe. My name is Liv. At least that's what everyone here calls me. I kept my head down, letting my greasy bangs hide my eyes and the deep-seated vigilance that didn't belong in a place like this. My uniform was always a size too big, the baggy fabric just enough to cover my wrists and the hideous old scars on my forearms. They were cigarette burns trailing across my skin like ugly centipedes permanently branded into my flesh and my memory. Peter Vance, my ex-husband on paper, was a monster. His favorite pastime used to be watching me struggle in agony. Liv, stop spacing out. The lobster bisque for the Astor room is ready. Run it over now. Head chef Gordon's roar yanked me out of my sticky, suffocating memories. I jolted, nodding submissively. Yes, chef. Right away. I carefully took the porcelain tureen from his hands. It was warm to the touch, the silver tray heavy, but my grip was rock steady. These hands used to type 12 characters of code per second. They used to fly across keyboards at international cryptography competitions like butterflies. Now they were only good for carrying plates. The Astor Room was the most exclusive private dining room in this Michelin-starred Manhattan establishment. Rumor had it that a single dinner here cost more than what I made washing dishes for a year. I took a deep breath, adjusted my stiff lips into a polite smile, and pushed open the heavy mahogany doors. The room was hazy with smoke, though not the choking kind. It smelled of premium Cuban cigars. A man sat at the head of the table. Even in the dim lighting, his aura was so overpowering it was impossible to ignore. He was Harrison Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Enterprises, a billionaire who practically lived on the covers of Forbes and Wall Street Journal. I had only ever seen him in the news. In person, he was even more intimidating. His deep eyes were like a frozen lake, motionless, yet capable of swallowing everything. Sitting next to him was a blonde, blue-eyed foreigner, a representative from an overseas syndicate. And sitting diagonally across from him, wearing a tailored suit and a slick, calculating smile, was Harrison's highly paid chief translator, Jeremy Cole. Mr. Thorne, your soup, I murmured, keeping my eyes lowered in the most humble posture possible, as I gently placed the tureen on the table. Just as I was about to back away, Jeremy Cole's fingers tapped casually against the smooth crystal of his wine glass. Tap, 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 tap. The sound was faint, almost drowned out by the hum of the HVAC system. But to my ears, it was like a thunderclap. My blood froze instantly. That wasn't a subconscious tick. It was a highly specialized military shortcode derived from Morse, but stealthier and faster. My father had been an instructor for a military cyber intelligence unit. I had been learning this since I was 6. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, tap, tap. DDD. Deal done. Accept. I sharply raised my head and looked at the foreign representative. He appeared to be listening intently to Jeremy's translation, but beneath the tablecloth, his left index finger was tapping lightly against his thigh. Tap, 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 tap. Tap. Tap, tap, tap. KEY. Key clause. My heart sank. This was a meticulously orchestrated trap. Jeremy, the chief translator Harrison trusted, had already been bought off. They were exchanging information in real time right under his nose, confirming that their prey had taken the bait. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Volkov says that regarding the technical handover details, they are willing to concede another 3% to show their sincerity, Jeremy said, a professional, earnest smile plastered on his face. A flawless, watertight translation. Harrison gave a faint nod, seemingly satisfied with the outcome. The corporate lawyer beside him handed over a thick stack of M&A contracts and whispered something in his ear. I watched as Harrison picked up a Mont Blanc fountain pen from the table and twisted off the cap. The black nib glinted with a cold, metallic luster under the chandelier, looking like a dagger about to be plunged into a heart. Don't sign it! The thought screamed in my head like a siren. This multi-billion-dollar acquisition contract definitely contained a trap that would send Thorne Enterprises straight to hell, and that key clause was the detonator. What should I do? Rush up and tell him his translator is lying? I was a waitress. If I accused $1 million a year executive translator, I'd be treated like a lunatic, dragged out by security, and fired immediately. Then I wouldn't be able to afford the medical bills for my daughter Mia next month. Worse, if my identity was exposed, Peter would smell the blood in the water and hunt me down like a shark. I couldn't risk it. Mia was waiting for me, but as I looked at Harrison's cold, chiseled profile, I knew he was stepping blindly into the abyss. And I was the only person in this room who could read the map to that abyss. 3 years ago, Peter Vance had done the exact same thing to me. Using a seemingly flawless patent transfer agreement, he had stolen my life's work, then locked me up and tortured me. The agony of falling from the clouds into hell, the pain of being betrayed by the person you trusted most, I knew it better than anyone. I couldn't just stand by and watch history repeat itself. Harrison's pen touched the paper. In that split second, all my hesitation and fear were crushed to dust. I gripped the silver tray, lunged forward as if I had tripped over my own feet, and let out a short gasp. Ah, the soup tureen tipped over. I used my own body to block the scalding liquid from splashing onto anyone else. Most of it poured down my own forearm. The burning pain was excruciating, but I had achieved my goal. In the chaos, my body fell right against Harrison. Before his freezing glare could lock onto me, I used every ounce of strength I had to lean into his ear and whisper at a volume only the two of us could hear with rapid, crystal-clear precision. Don't sign. He's lying. The tapping frequency gave away their bottom line. As soon as the words left my mouth, I scrambled back, acting as though it were nothing but a clumsy accident. I dropped to my knees in a panic, picking up the broken porcelain. My voice trembled with fake tears. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll clean it up right away. I buried my head low, not daring to meet anyone's eyes. The searing pain in my arm was getting sharper, but my heart was ice cold. The dice were cast. Whether I lived or died now was up to fate. A dead silence fell over the VIP room. I could feel multiple gazes burning into my back, Jeremy's fury, Volkov's confusion, and Harrison's bottomless, scrutinizing stare. Time seemed to stretch every second, feeling like a century. Finally, I heard a soft click. It was the sound of the fountain pen cap being screwed back on. Harrison slowly set the pen down. He didn't look at me. Instead, he looked at Jeremy, whose face had gone slightly pale, and a cryptic smirk touched the corners of Harrison's mouth. Mr. Cole, Harrison said, his voice flat, devoid of anger or joy. I'm suddenly feeling a bit fatigued. Let's conclude today's negotiations here. The moment Harrison spoke, the air in the room seemed to solidify. Mr. Thorne Jeremy's professional smile froze, a flash of panic crossing his eyes. But we've practically reached a consensus on the contract terms. Mr. Volkov has offered his utmost sincerity. To terminate now, I'm afraid. I said. Harrison interrupted, his tone unchanging, though every syllable felt dipped in liquid nitrogen. We are done here. He stood up, his tall frame, casting a shadow that entirely swallowed Jeremy. Harrison didn't even glance at Volkov. Instead, his gaze fell on me, still kneeling on the floor. You. Come with me. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable command. My body stiffened, my heart hammering against my ribs. Did he believe me? Or was he taking me somewhere private to dispose of the lunatic who ruined his deal? Mr. Thorne, she's just a clumsy waitress. Why lower yourself to deal with her? Jeremy immediately stepped forward, trying to block my path. I'll have the manager fire her right now and apologize to you and Mr. Volkov. As he spoke, Jeremy shot me a venomous glare, mouthing the words, "You're dead." Harrison ignored him completely. He just looked at me and repeated, "Come here." Gritting my teeth and fighting the fiery pain in my arm, I scrambled up from the floor and stumbled after him. We didn't leave the suite. Instead, we entered a smaller private lounge adjacent to the dining room. The door clicked shut, cutting off all the noise from outside. We were the only two people in this secluded room. Harrison didn't turn on the lights. Only the ambient glow from the hallway seeped through the crack under the door, outlining his sharp, unyielding silhouette. He stood in the shadows like a lion inspecting its prey, exuding a silent, dangerous aura. I didn't dare move. I barely dared to breathe. Speak. Finally, he broke the silence with a single word. Speak about what, sir? I played dumb, my voice raspy from nerves. What did you hear? Or rather, what did you see? He took a step closer, the overwhelming pressure almost making my knees buckle. I knew this was my only chance. Make him believe me, or I was entirely doomed. I raised my head, meeting his scrutinizing gaze, and dropped the facade of the submissive waitress. I reached out my right hand and used my knuckles to tap lightly against the mahogany side table. Tap, 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 duh, deal done, ready to sign. Then I switched to my left hand, using the pad of my finger to mimic the foreigner's soft tapping. Tap, 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 KEY, key clause. They were confirming whether you had overlooked the most fatal trap clause in the contract. My voice was calm, so calm it felt foreign to me. When I finished, the room fell into a deathly silence. Harrison's eyes narrowed in the dark, sharp as blade edges. He stared at me intently, as if trying to see right through my soul. "Military-grade decryption skills don't belong to a woman serving soup," he said, enunciating every word. "Who exactly are you?" That question was a key unlocking the memories I had buried deep. Who was I? I was Olivia Spencer once, the youngest cryptography prodigy in the country. But now I was just a fugitive with a fake name hiding from a devil washing dishes to pay for my daughter's medical bills. "Who I am isn't important," I deflected, my voice trembling slightly. "What's important is that your translator is selling you out. You absolutely cannot sign that contract." Just then, frantic knocking came from the door. Mr. Thorne, are you in there? Mr. Volkov is getting very agitated." "Please," Harrison scoffed. He yanked the door open. Jeremy stood there looking frantic, but upon seeing the door open, he forced a sycophantic smile. "Mr. Thorne, what a misunderstanding. Should I go placate Mr. Volkov while you—" Before he could finish, Harrison stepped aside, revealing me standing by the side table. "Mr. Cole," Harrison's voice was ice. "This waitress just performed a very interesting percussion piece for me. Would you like to hear it?" Jeremy's face, drained of all color. He looked at me in disbelief, then back at Harrison, unable to hide the sheer panic in his eyes. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know what you're talking about." He was still trying to bluff. "You don't," Harrison smiled, a smile devoid of any warmth. "Let me translate it for you. D. Weren't you just telling your masters that I, the big fish, had finally taken the bait?" Jeremy's knees gave out and he nearly collapsed onto the carpet. He finally realized that his proudest, most secretive method of communication had been cracked by the most inconspicuous waitress in the room. No, Mr. Thorne, listen to me. This is slander. This crazy woman is talking nonsense." He pointed a shaking finger at me, stammering wildly. "She's trying to extort you. Yes, she wants money. Is that so?" Harrison walked up to him and reached out gently, straightening Jeremy's crooked tie. The motion was surprisingly tender, but his words were ruthlessly brutal. "Jeremy, you've been with me for 3 years. The salary and bonuses I've given you are enough to buy 3 mansions in the Hamptons. Tell me exactly how much did they pay you to make betraying me worth it?" "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Jeremy was sweating profusely on the verge of tears. "Take him away," Harrison ordered the bodyguards waiting in the hall, his tone dismissive. "Audit his accounts and his family's accounts. I want to see whose money is so damn appealing." 2 men in black suits stepped in and hoisted the limp Jeremy up like a sack of potatoes. "Mr. Thorne, mercy, Mr. Thorne, I was wrong. I'll never do it again." Jeremy shrieked like a slaughtered pig, his voice fading as he was dragged down the corridor. The lounge was empty once again, save for Harrison and me. He had just disposed of $1 million executive like swatting a fly. I looked at him, my fear deepening. A man like this, whose moods were unpredictable and whose power was absolute? What would he do to me? The wild card who crashed his party. "What do you want?" He turned back to me, his eyes returning to that unreadable calm state. I opened my mouth, my mind racing. What did I want? I wanted freedom. I wanted safety. I wanted Mia to grow up healthy. But could I say that to him? I broke your soup, tureen stained your carpet, and wasted your valuable time. I lowered my head, slipping back into the persona of the lowly waitress. I just wanted to ask, could you advance me $5,000? I can work it off over the next year. My daughter, she's sick. I desperately need money for her surgery. I didn't dare ask for more. $5,000 was probably less than what he spent on a bottle of wine, but to me it was the money that could save Mia's life. Harrison fell silent. He looked at me, his gaze complex. After a long moment, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket, pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, and tossed it onto the mahogany table. "There's 10,000 here. Get lost," he said, turning his back and walking out of the lounge without another glance. I stared blankly at the stack of cash that was my salvation, then at his retreating figure. My emotions were entirely tangled. Was he letting me go? Without overthinking it, I grabbed the money and bolted out of the restaurant like a startled rabbit fleeing into the freezing, rainy New York night. I had to leave immediately. Jeremy had been dealt with, which meant his accomplices would soon know I was the one who ruined their plans. More importantly, Peter's hounds might have caught my scent. I had to grab Mia and run again. The rain was pouring down heavily, the icy drops stinging my face like tiny needles. I clutched my jacket tightly around the $10,000 and ran stumbling through the puddles toward my cramped, dark basement apartment in Queens. Mommy, the moment I pushed the creaking door open, a tiny, frail figure launched herself at me. It was Mia, my 5-year-old daughter. She hugged my legs tightly, her little face etched with worry. Mia had developed mild autism after witnessing Peter's violent outbursts. She rarely spoke, but she was more perceptive than anyone. Mia, be good. Mommy's home, I whispered, stroking her soft hair. The terror and exhaustion in my heart dissipated slightly. As long as she was here, I had a reason to keep fighting. I immediately started packing. There wasn't much to pack, just a few worn-out clothes and Mia's favorite stuffed bear. I stuffed the cash into the bear's hidden lining, grabbed Mia's hand, and prepared to flee into the night. But we were too late. When I pushed open the rusting iron gate to the alleyway, several men in black suits were blocking the narrow exit, standing like emotionless statues in the rain. The leader was a man with a scar running down his cheek. I recognized him. It was Rocco Peter Vance's most ruthless enforcer, Miss Spencer. Long time no see. Rocco sneered, revealing a mouth full of smoke-stained teeth. Mr. Vance misses you dearly. He sent us to invite you and the little lady back home. He emphasized the word invite heavily. My heart plummeted straight to rock bottom. They had found me. I instinctively shielded Mia behind my back, my body trembling with pure terror. I'm not going back. We're divorced. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. Whether you have anything to do with him isn't up to you, Rocco said, digging a finger into his ear impatiently. Miss Spencer, don't make us get physical. You know my boys are heavy-handed. If the little lady gets hurt, Mr. Vance would be heartbroken. He cast a vile, suggestive glance at Mia, cowering behind me. It was a naked threat. Right then, the restaurant manager Steve, a middle-aged man who had always seemed relatively kind to me, came jogging out from the other end of the alley. His face was plastered with a fawning, greedy smile. Rocco, sir, she's right here. You see about the reward, mister. Vance promised me. Rocco waved him off like a buzzing fly. I understood now. It was Steve. For a payout, he had sold me to the devil. Despair washed over me like a tidal wave. I looked at Rocco, stepping closer, looked at the menacing thugs behind him, and felt utterly, hopelessly powerless. I had been running for 3 years, hiding in the shadows like a rat, only to be cornered in this filthy, dead-end alley. Mommy. I'm scared, Mia whimpered softly behind me. I took a deep breath and pulled Mia tightly into my arms. Even if it killed me, I had to protect her. Don't touch her! I shrieked at Rocco, my voice sharp with desperation. Rocco sneered, reaching a massive hand out to grab me. But in that hair-raising moment, the low, powerful roar of engines tore through the rainy night, rapidly approaching from the street. The dim light at the alley's entrance was suddenly eclipsed by massive shadows. Everyone instinctively turned to look. And everyone froze. The narrow street was suddenly choked with a convoy of identical pitch-black cars. The silver spirit of ecstasy hood ornaments gleamed with a cold, aristocratic light under the street lamps. Rolls-Royce Phantoms. Not one. Not two. An entire fleet of 20 black Rolls-Royces had silently sealed off the entire block like a coiled black dragon. The headlights snapped on in unison, cutting through the rain like snow-white blades, illuminating the filthy alleyway as bright as day. Simultaneously, the doors of every vehicle opened. Bodyguards in tailored black suits and white gloves stepped out. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, their faces emotionless like a highly trained private army. They quickly formed lines on both sides of the street, blocking out the few gawking pedestrians. It was a display of power straight out of a mob movie, only infinitely more extravagant. Rocco and his street thugs were dumbfounded. They had never seen anything like this in their lives. Steve, the rat manager, was so terrified his legs gave out, and he collapsed right into a muddy puddle. Under the shocked gazes of everyone present, the rear door of the center vehicle was respectfully opened by a bodyguard. A massive black umbrella emerged, first rain beating off its surface. Then a polished black leather shoe stepped onto the wet pavement without making a splash. A man slowly emerged from the car holding the umbrella and walked toward us step by step. It was Harrison Thorne. He wasn't wearing a suit today, but a perfectly tailored black trench coat that accentuated his commanding height. The rain had dampened his hair, a few black strands clinging to his forehead, adding an indescribable lethal magnetism to his chiseled face. He looked like a god walking out of the darkness, descending upon this slum with the force of a thunderbolt. He ignored Rocco, whose face had been drained of color. He ignored the manager shivering on the ground. His deep gaze pierced through the rain and landed squarely on me. He walked right up to me, the massive black umbrella shielding both me and Mia from the freezing downpour. Then, in front of everyone, he held out a crisp gold-embossed offer letter. Chief Information Security Officer at Thorn Enterprises, his voice wasn't loud, but it echoed clearly in everyone's ears, striking like a thunderbolt. An annual salary of $2 million. A luxury penthouse in Manhattan. A company car and driver. The company will fully cover your daughter's medical expenses and elite private education. He paused, looking at my wide, shocked eyes, and the corner of his mouth curved into an arrogant smirk. Olivia Spencer. Are you getting in the car, Olivia Spencer? He called me by my real name. I froze. In my arms, Mia stopped crying. She looked up with her big eyes staring curiously at the towering man in front of her. As for Rocco, the moment he heard the name Olivia Spencer and $2 million salary, the last drop of blood vanished from his face. Stupid as he was, he realized he had just kicked a titanium wall. Mr. Thorne. Rocco's voice shook like a leaf. It's a misunderstanding. A total misunderstanding. Harrison finally pulled his gaze away from me and shot Rocco a freezing side-eye. You dare touch my people. Just one sentence. He didn't even raise his voice, but it made Rocco experience a level of primal terror he had never known. He dropped to his knees in the dirty puddle, bowing furiously. Mercy, Mr. Thorne, I was blind. It was Peter Vance. Vance told me to come. It has nothing to do with me. Harrison didn't waste another breath on him. His gaze returned to me, carrying a hint of inquiry. Are you getting in? He asked again. I looked at him. I looked at the 20 Rolls-Royces behind him, representing absolute power and unimaginable wealth. I looked at Rocco groveling in the mud like a dog. 3 years on the run. 3 years of humiliation. 3 years of waking up in cold sweats. In this exact moment, it all felt like a sick joke. I had no reason to refuse. I straightened my back, which had grown slightly hunched from years of bowing to others, and pulled Mia tighter against my chest. Meeting Harrison's gaze, I nodded. I'm getting in. The heavy door of the Rolls-Royce closed in front of me, completely severing us from the wind, the rain, and the chaos outside. The interior was warm and dry, smelling of expensive leather and a faint hint of sandalwood. Mia, exhausted by the ordeal, quickly fell asleep in my arms, her breathing evening out. I stared out the window at the blurring city lights, my mind still reeling with a sense of unreality. Just a few hours ago, I was a dishwasher betting my life for a $10,000 advance. Now I was sitting in a custom-built luxury car transformed overnight into a multi-million-dollar tech executive. The turning point of my destiny had come at breakneck speed. Where are we going? I asked softly, breaking the silence in the cabin. My safe house, Harrison replied without looking up from the tablet on his lap, his legs crossed elegantly. Until you officially onboard, it's the safest place for you. Peter Vance won't be able to find you there. At the mention of Peter Vance, my heart constricted. How did you find out my real name? And about him, that was the burning question. Harrison finally looked up from his screen, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Someone who can decipher tactical shortcode in real time is never just a waitress. I had my team run a background check. It wasn't hard. His tone was as casual as if he were discussing the weather. But I broke out in a cold sweat. In a matter of hours, he had dug up a past I had spent 3 years desperately trying to bury. The sheer power this man wielded was far more terrifying than I had imagined. And yet, you still dare to hire me. He seemed to read my mind, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Olivia Spencer, former gold medalist at the International Collegiate Programming Contest, the original architect of the Aegis firewall system, the youngest cryptography, PhD candidate at MIT. Though your digital footprint was wiped clean 3 years ago, the internet never truly forgets. With every word he spoke, my heart sank deeper. These credentials, which used to be my greatest pride, now felt like shackles, reminding me of an unbearable past. The Aegis system, he paused, his eyes sharpening. It is currently the core product of Apex Technologies, your ex-husband's company. It brought him a multi-billion-dollar market cap. But from what I've gathered, the patent application date suspiciously aligns with the period you took a leave of absence from MIT and became his hidden wife. And you, the original creator of the system, haven't seen a single dime from it. His words were like a scalpel, surgically slicing open my bloodiest wounds. That's all. In the past. I lowered my eyes, my voice hoarse. No, Harrison countered. That is not the past. That is your stolen life. And now I'm giving you the platform to take it back. The car glided to a halt in front of a sprawling, ultra-modern estate located in upstate New York, far from the prying eyes of the city. The security here was draconian. We had passed through 3 heavily armed checkpoints just to enter the perimeter. The mansion featured massive floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the Hudson Valley. A sharp-looking middle-aged housekeeper came out to greet us respectfully, taking the sleeping Mia from my arms. "Martha, get the child settled," Harrison instructed. "Also, Thorne." I followed Harrison inside. Everything here felt as if it had been prepped exclusively for me. The walk-in closet was stocked with brand-new, high-end designer businesswear ranging from tailored suits to evening gowns, all perfectly my size. The vanity was lined with top-tier skincare and makeup. "Take a shower and change." Harrison stood in the doorway, making no move to enter. "I'll be waiting for you in the study in an hour." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My skin was sallow, my hair brittle, my eyes brimming with lingering panic and exhaustion. I truly looked entirely unworthy of the title Chief Information Security Officer. The hot water blasted over me, washing away the grime and the humiliation I had accumulated over the last 3 years. I took a pair of scissors and chopped off the ragged, overgrown hair I had used to hide my face, leaving a sharp, clean bob. I used concealer to carefully cover the scars on my face and applied a sharp, professional layer of makeup. When I stepped out of the bathroom wearing a pristine white silk blouse and tailored black slacks, the woman in the mirror felt both familiar and alien. The cowardice and subservience had been scrubbed away, replaced by the cold, calculating confidence that belonged exclusively to Olivia Spencer. An hour later, I walked into the study right on time. It was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on one side and a wall of glass looking out over the dark, sprawling forest on the other. Harrison sat behind a massive desk. When he saw me, a fleeting flash of genuine surprise crossed his eyes, though he quickly masked it. "Sit." He didn't give me any corporate culture speeches or force me to sign a stack of NDAs. Instead, he slid a sleek silver laptop across the desk toward me. "These are the 3 largest security vulnerabilities currently threatening Thorne Enterprises' internal network. One is from an Eastern European hacker syndicate. One is from a corporate rival. The third is of unknown origin, but its methodology is the most advanced and the most lethal." He looked at me without a trace of sympathy or pity. It was a cold, calculating evaluation. "Prove to me that you're worth $2 million, he said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of an anvil. "Then, use your own methods to bite him to death." Him, of course, meant Peter Vance. I understood. Harrison Thorne wasn't running a charity. Saving me and hiring me was an investment. He saw the genius that had been buried, and he saw the white-hot hatred I harbored for Peter. He wanted me to become the sharpest knife in his arsenal to slit the throat of his corporate rival. It was a fair trade. I liked this kind of fairness. I reached out and opened the laptop. The cold metallic touch beneath my fingertips sent a shock of familiarity racing through my veins. "Boot up." "Network connect." Command prompt. My fingers began to dance across the keys, producing a rapid, rhythmic clatter. Lines of complex code cascaded down the screen like a digital waterfall. I didn't even need to think. The syntax and logic gates were carved into my very bones. 10 minutes later, I stopped typing. The first vulnerability was a logic trap in your firewall. They used a clever IP spoofing technique to bypass standard detection. I've patched it, ran a reverse trace, and locked onto their physical MAC address in Romania. I turned the laptop toward him. The second vulnerability was internal privilege abuse. Your VP of marketing has been using his company machine to browse an encrypted dark web marketplace. Here are his browsing logs from the past 3 months and his transaction receipts. Finally, I clicked open the third folder. As for the third, unknown attack. I looked up, meeting Harrison's gaze, dead on, speaking word by word. "It's not an external attack. It's a super backdoor built directly into the Aegis system you procured. And the highest level access to that backdoor is controlled by one person." "Who?" "Peter Vance." Harrison's pupils contracted sharply. Seeing the rare look of absolute shock on his face brought a surge of vindictive pleasure to my chest. "I built the Aegis system. I know every backdoor, every string of code like the back of my hand," I said, my voice ice cold. "Peter thinks he stole a gold mine. He doesn't know that I've been holding the detonator this whole time. From this moment on, Thorne Enterprises' network is an impenetrable fortress. And the countdown to Apex Technologies' doomsday has officially begun." The next day, I made my public debut as the Chief Information Security Officer of Thorne Enterprises. The news sent a shockwave through the New York business and tech sectors. No one knew where this Olivia Spencer had come from. An unknown woman parachuting into such a critical role at a titan like Thorn Enterprises was unheard of. The most shocked person of all had to be Peter Vance. I could easily picture the spectacular expression on his face when he saw my photo in the news. A paranoid megalomaniac like him would instantly realize that I hadn't just been saved by some random Good Samaritan. I had found a new, unimaginably powerful patron. Sure enough, that afternoon, I received a call from Harrison's executive assistant. Miss Spencer Apex Technologies is hosting a product launch event tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the Javits Center. They are launching what they claim is the world's most secure enterprise firewall system, Aegis 2. Mr. Thorn's directive is that he would like you to represent Thorn Enterprises and go observe the event. The assistant emphasized the word observe with heavy implication. I knew this was the first stage Harrison had set for me. It was my official declaration of war against Peter. Understood. I'll be there. I hung up the phone, a cold sneer forming on my lips. Aegis 2. Peter was an empty suit. Other than stealing my work, he had zero actual R&D capabilities. This so-called 2.0 version was undoubtedly just a flashy UI patched over the unfinished beta architecture I had left behind. Calling a system riddled with logic flaws and backdoors the world's most secure was the ultimate joke. The next afternoon, I arrived punctually at the Javits Center. I wore a sharply tailored stark white designer suit. My hair was pulled back into a sleek chignon, my makeup immaculate and intimidating. The moment I stepped into the venue, I drew every eye in the room. Flashbulbs erupted around me like a tidal wave as tech journalists swarmed forward, shoving microphones in my face. Miss Spencer, is it true you came out of nowhere? What is your relationship with Mr. Thorn, Miss Spencer? What are your thoughts on Apex Tech's Aegis 2 Will Thorn Enterprises? Consider a procurement deal. I answered none of them. Maintaining a polite but icy smile, I walked flanked by Thorn bodyguards to my reserved seat in the VIP front row. My seat was directly facing the main stage. Soon, Peter Vance strode onto the stage, oozing arrogant confidence. He wore a custom Tom Ford suit, his hair slicked back perfectly. He looked the part of the visionary CEO, but when his eyes swept over the VIP section and met mine, his triumphant smile noticeably stiffened. Yet he quickly recovered, even flashing me a look of feigned melancholic affection. I knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to play the heartbroken victim in front of the press, trying to use our past relationship to rattle me. Thank you all members of the press and esteemed industry colleagues for attending Apex Technologies' launch event today. Peter's voice boomed through the PA system. Today I am bringing you a revolutionary product, Aegis 2. He began to spout corporate jargon using flashy graphics and completely fabricated data to boast about the system's impenetrable defenses. I sat there quietly watching him like I was observing a clown performing a cheap magic trick. Finally, he reached the live demonstration segment. To prove the absolute security of Aegis 2, we welcome any technical expert in the audience to attempt a live penetration test on our system right now. Peter scanned the room, his eyes inevitably locking onto me with a hint of provocation. I wonder if the newly appointed CISO of Thorn Enterprises, Miss Spencer, would do us the honor of providing some pointers. He was forcing me onto the stage. He was betting that in such a highly publicized setting, I wouldn't dare humiliate him too badly and would just go through the motions. He bet wrong. I was there explicitly to humiliate him. I stood up and slowly walked onto the stage under the collective gaze of 1,000 attendees. Since Mr. Vance is so insistent, I'd be happy to indulge you. I took the laptop offered by a staff member. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs in the hall effortlessly. Peter looked at me, a warning flashing in his eyes. He lowered his voice, leaning in so only I could hear. Liv, stop making a scene. Come back to me. I know it's hard raising a kid by yourself out there. We can wipe the slate clean. Let bygones be bygones. Wipe the slate clean, I smiled, though the amusement didn't reach my eyes. Mr. Vance, you stole my life, locked me in a house for 3 years, and nearly beat me to death. And now you're talking about wiping the slate clean. His face instantly turned an ugly shade of purple. I ignored him, focusing my attention on the laptop. I didn't even bother navigating his flashy demonstration GUI. I immediately pulled up the core command terminal. My fingers tapped lightly against the keys. There was no furious hacking montage, just 3 of the simplest, most fundamental lines of root code. Line 1, bypass the superficial spoofing defense layer. Line 2, awaken the super backdoor I coded years ago. Line 3, execute kernel panic protocol. From the moment I sat down to the moment I finished typing, less than 3 minutes had passed. I hit enter. While Peter was still rambling to the audience, boasting about how Aegis 2 Zero had just repelled a simulated DDoS attack. The massive LED screen behind him flickered violently. The complex data visualization graphs vanished instantly. In their place, a single massive word written in blood-red text appeared on the screen, striking like a resounding slap to the face of Peter Vance and Apex Technologies, PWNED. The entire convention center went dead silent. Thousands of jaws dropped as people stared at the screen, then back to Peter, whose face had been drained of all blood. "What is this tech team? Go check the servers!" Peter panicked, screaming at the backstage crew. I stood up, snapped the laptop shut, and handed it back to the dumbfounded staff member. I walked over to Peter, grabbed the microphone from his podium, and looked out at the sea of shocked faces. My voice was crisp and merciless. "Ladies and gentlemen, the demonstration is over. The so-called Aegis 2 is a piece of garbage that can't even maintain basic logic consistency. Its only value is proving that Apex Technologies' R&D department is an absolute joke. Thorn Enterprises will never partner with a fraud." I dropped the mic. Amidst thousands of complex, bewildered stares, I turned and walked off the stage. Behind me, I left Peter Vance with a face so contorted with rage and humiliation it barely looked human. I knew that from this moment on, the war between us had officially begun, and this was merely the opening salvo. The absolute massacre at the launch event sent shockwaves through Wall Street. Apex Technologies' stock plummeted at the opening bell, vaporizing hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap in a single day. Peter and his Aegis 2 became the laughingstock of Silicon Valley. Meanwhile, the name Olivia Spencer was suddenly on everyone's lips in New York. People were dying to know my background and the intricate web connecting me, Harrison Thorne and Peter Vance. I ignored the media frenzy and poured all my energy into my work. Harrison had given me total administrative clearance and the best engineering team money could buy. I began completely rebuilding Thorn Enterprises' entire cybersecurity infrastructure. But I knew Peter wouldn't take this lying down. He was a venomous snake. I had stepped on his tail and he was bound to strike back in the most vicious way possible. Sure enough, a few days later, as I was leaving the Thorn Tower in Midtown to pick up Mia from school, I was blocked in the underground parking garage. It was Peter. He looked exhausted. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot. The once polished tech bro looked like a gambler who had just lost his life savings. "Olivia." He lunged out from behind a concrete pillar, blocking my path. His voice was hoarse. "Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to ruin me? Ruin you?" I looked at him, finding the accusation almost funny. "Peter, everything you have was stolen from me. I'm just taking back what's mine." "I stole nothing." He bristled like a stepped-on cat, his facade crumbling. "I gave you an amazing life. I gave you the luxury to just sit at home and research without having to work. I made you who you are, you ungrateful bitch." I had listened to this gaslighting garbage for 3 years. I was sick of it. In the past, he would have manipulated me into doubting myself, but now he only made my stomach churn. "Get out of my way," I said coldly, refusing to waste another breath on him. "No." He violently grabbed my wrist, his grip terrifyingly tight. "You're coming back with me. I know you hate me." "It was my fault. I'll change. I swear I won't hit you anymore. We can go back to the way things were, okay?" He forced a pathetic, pleading look onto his face, but deep in his eyes I saw the familiar, psychotic possessiveness. I violently wrenched my hand free. "Peter, stop acting. You make me sick." My words pushed him over the edge. "You ungrateful whore," his mask of remorse instantly shredded, revealing the monster underneath. "You think you're untouchable just because you're sleeping with Harrison Thorne. You're nothing but a dog on his leash. I built you up and I can stomp you right back into the dirt." As he screamed, his hands went to his waist, unbuckling his expensive Hermes belt, the brown leather belt with the heavy gold H-buckle. My pupils constricted. My breathing stopped. It was that belt. For 3 years, on countless nights, he had used that exact belt to whip me until I was covered in lacerations. The whoosh of the leather cutting through the air, the sickening thud of the metal buckle hitting bone, it was my eternal nightmare. My body began to shake uncontrollably. PTSD gripped my throat like an invisible, suffocating hand. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even scream for help. Scared now, Peter sneered, a sick, satisfied grin spreading across his face as he watched me cower. "That's more like it. You were born to be trash under my boot." He raised the belt high, bringing it down viciously toward my face. I instinctively squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the familiar agonizing pain. But the pain never came. Instead, I heard a sickening crunch and a blood-curdling scream from Peter. I opened my eyes, trembling. Two massive bodyguards in black suits had appeared out of thin air. One had Peter's wrist locked in a vice grip, twisting it so hard he couldn't move. The other kicked the back of Peter's knee, forcing him to slam onto the concrete floor with a heavy thud. Then the calm, measured sound of footsteps echoed from behind me. I turned and saw Harrison Thorne. He wore his usual cold, aloof expression, but his eyes burned with a freezing, murderous intent I had never seen before. He walked over to Peter, looking down at him as if looking at a pile of biohazard waste. Mr. Thorne. Peter stammered in absolute terror. Harrison didn't say a word. He bent down and pulled the belt from Peter's limp hand. Then he lifted his foot clad in a bespoke Italian leather Oxford and brought it down brutally on the hand Peter had used to hold the belt. Crack. The sharp sound of bone splintering echoed through the empty garage. Aarrgghh. Peter unleashed a gut-wrenching howl, his face contorting in pure agony. My hand, you broke it." Harrison didn't lift his foot. He ground his heel down harder. He looked at Peter's thrashing form, his voice as cold as hellfire. "An executive of Thorne Enterprises is not someone you get to touch." He paused, tossing the belt onto Peter's weeping face, making no effort to hide his absolute disgust. Using a belt on a woman. "Vance, you are the most pathetic piece of trash I have ever laid eyes on." Without sparing Peter another glance, Harrison turned and walked toward me. He took off his trench coat and draped it over my violently shivering shoulders, wrapping me tightly inside it. "It's over," he said. It was the first time I heard genuine warmth in his voice. I looked at him, the man who had physically pulled me out of my nightmare, and the tight string holding my sanity together finally snapped. Tears poured down my face uncontrollably. It wasn't weakness. It was the overwhelming release of surviving a mix of grievance, rage, and profound gratitude. "Take Miss Spencer home," Harrison ordered one of the bodyguards. He then glanced back at Peter, who was still wailing on the floor. "As for him, call the NYPD. Tell them it was an unprovoked assault, and notify my legal team. I want him sued into absolute bankruptcy." "Yes, sir." I was escorted into the back of an SUV. As we pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Peter being dragged up by security, waiting for the police. The face that used to paralyze me with fear now only held pathetic despair. I knew it was truly over for him. And I could finally say goodbye to the darkest chapter of my life. A fractured hand and an assault charge were enough to keep Peter Vance in a holding cell at Rikers Island for a few days. Meanwhile, Harrison's legal armada launched a blitzkrieg against him, filing lawsuits for intellectual property theft, corporate defamation, and domestic abuse. I handed over 3 years' worth of evidence, medical reports, audio recordings, and the vile, threatening texts he had sent me. Peter panicked. He knew that if the domestic abuse charges stuck, his carefully curated tech-visionary family man persona would be annihilated and Apex Tech would die with it. So he launched a pathetic PR counteroffensive. He poured millions into hiring bot farms and sleazy tabloid writers to flood the internet with spin. He painted himself as the victim of a gold-digging ex-wife. Ex-wife Olivia Spencer abandons family for billionaire Harrison Thorne, conspires to short Apex Tech stock. Heartbroken tech CEO Peter Vance, seen drinking alone, "I just want my family back." Exclusive Olivia Spencer's history of infidelity. Daughter's paternity in question. The articles were highly dramatized, accompanied by paparazzi photos of Peter looking haggard. They successfully riled up the outrage machine. The public narrative began to shift. Keyboard warriors began to sympathize with Peter and hurl abuse at me. "She belongs in the trash. Abandoning her husband and kid for money, poor Peter. You can tell he really loved her. Harrison Thorne is no saint either. Homewrecker and a gold digger, match made in hell." I scrolled through the venomous comments, my heart cold. This was classic Peter Vance. Gaslighting, manipulating public opinion, twisting black into white. Thorne Enterprises' PR team suggested I immediately release a statement to clarify the facts. But I refused. I knew that getting into a mudslinging contest with a sociopath would only make it dirtier. I needed a definitive, indisputable weapon. Something that would rip his mask off permanently in one strike. However, I still underestimated how low Peter would stoop. To salvage his reputation and secure Mia's custody as his final bargaining chip, he targeted our daughter. One afternoon, a mob of paparazzi suddenly gathered outside Mia's exclusive private kindergarten on the Upper East Side. When I arrived to pick her up, Peter was there, accompanied by a sleazy lawyer, and holding a bouquet of flowers. He blocked our path, playing the role of the loving father. "Mia, Daddy's here to see you." He wore a sickeningly sweet smile, opening his arms to hug her. Camera flashes erupted like a strobe light. Reporters swarmed us like flies to rotting meat. "Mr. Vance, did you come specifically to see your daughter, Mr. Vance? What do you have to say about your ex-wife's allegations of domestic abuse?" Mia was terrified by the chaos. Her face went deathly pale, and she gripped the hem of my coat, trembling violently as she hid behind my legs. "Members of the press," Peter said, turning to the cameras with an expression of profound sorrow. "The abuse allegations are completely fabricated. I love my wife. I love my daughter. I don't even know why she left me. Liv, I know you're still angry, but please don't use our child as a weapon against me." His performance was Oscar-worthy. He actually squeezed out a tear. Watching his repulsive act made me shake with rage. "Peter, have you no shame, Mommy?" "I'm scared," Mia sobbed quietly behind me. Just as Peter reached out, trying to physically grab Mia to force a reunion photo op, a black Bentley glided silently to a halt by the curb. The door swung open, and Harrison Thorne stepped out. He didn't have his security detail today. He was alone. But his sheer presence was enough to command the entire street. The reporters' cameras instinctively pivoted toward him. He ignored them all, walking straight to us. Without a word, he scooped the terrified Mia up into his arms, shielding her against his chest. Uncle Harrison, seeing him, Mia felt safe. She sobbed, wrapping her little arms tightly around his neck. "Mr. Thorne, this is a family matter." "Keep out of it," Peter hissed, jealousy and pure venom flashing in his eyes. Harrison didn't even look at him. He lowered his head and gently wiped Mia's tears away. "Don't cry, Mia. Tell Uncle Harrison. Who do you want to be with?" His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. Every camera, every microphone, every pair of eyes locked onto the 5-year-old girl. Mia lifted her head, her big, clear eyes still shining with tears. She looked at her biological father wearing his fake, loving smile. Then she looked at Harrison holding her securely. And then, in front of the live feeds of a dozen media outlets, the little girl spoke in a fragile but incredibly clear voice. "Bad Daddy. He hits Mommy. He hits her with the belt. Until she bleeds. I don't want Bad Daddy." She paused, her tiny hands clutching Harrison's lapel like a lifeline. "Uncle Harrison doesn't hit. Uncle Harrison is Superman." Out of the mouths of babes. The testimony of a traumatized 5-year-old was vastly more powerful and more heartbreaking than any adult's PR statement. The entire street fell completely silent. The reporters who had just been hounding me lowered their microphones. They looked at Peter, their eyes filling with disgust and fury. Peter's face went from flushed to pale to a sickly corpse-like gray. All his spin, all his lies were instantly vaporized by a child's innocent, brutal truth. He was exposed completely and utterly destroyed. Social death in real time. Harrison, holding Mia, threw a freezing glare at the paralyzed Peter Vance. Then he looked at the cameras. His voice was calm but struck like a judge's gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you have your headline. From today onward, Olivia Spencer and her daughter are under my protection. Anyone who dares harm them in any way will find themselves at war with Thorne Enterprises." With that, he carried Mia, guided me to the Bentley, and drove away, leaving a stunned crowd in our wake. Inside the car, Mia, exhausted from crying, fell asleep against Harrison's shoulder. I looked out the window. The sunset was painting the Manhattan skyline a warm orange. The 3-year nightmare was finally decisively ending. I turned my head to look at the man sitting next to me, the man with the sharp jawline holding my daughter. "Thank you," I whispered. It was the first time I had thanked him so sincerely. Not for the $2 million salary, not for the penthouse, but because in my absolute darkest moment, he had given me and Mia a safe harbor. Harrison didn't turn his head, merely giving a low, "Peter won't just let this go," he said, staring at the road, his eyes dark. "A cornered dog will bite." I knew what he meant. A man pushed to the absolute edge is capable of anything. I know I clenched my fists, which is why before he can bite, I have to throw him off the cliff. My revenge isn't over yet. Mia's words at the kindergarten spread across social media like a virus. Every second of that video battered the public consciousness. Overnight, Peter Vance went from a visionary CEO to a universally despised wife-beating monster. Apex Technologies' stock went into freefall, teetering on the edge of delisting from the Nasdaq. The board of directors emergency ousted Peter as CEO, desperately trying to sever ties to save the company, but it was too late. The Aegis system's credibility was zero. Major clients canceled their contracts. Apex was in a death spiral. I knew this was when Peter would be at his most dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose will burn the world down with him. Sure enough, the cybersecurity department at Thorn Enterprises detected anomalous activity. Miss Spencer, we've identified a highly stealthy vector initiating persistent penetration attempts against our core database. Alex, my lead engineer, pointed at a string of rapidly scrolling code on the monitor, looking grim. Their methodology is incredibly sophisticated. This isn't your average corporate espionage hacker. I walked over to the screen, studying the attack path. My eyes turned to ice. I knew this method intimately. It was Peter. Or more accurately, it was the encrypted attack protocol I had taught Peter years ago. He was making his final desperate move. He wanted to steal Thorn Enterprises' core trade secrets, either to sell them to a rival or leak them to the dark web, hoping to drag Thorn down in a murder-suicide pact. And he hadn't come alone. I pointed at a spoofed IP on the screen. That source traces back to a dark web node belonging to a hacker syndicate called Prometheus. Peter must have emptied his offshore accounts to hire them for a coordinated assault. What do we do? Initiate Level 1 lockdown, Alex asked. No. I shook my head, a cold smirk touching my lips. Defending is too passive. I watched the blinking attack signals on the screen like I was watching a rat sniff out a trap. Open the back door, I ordered flatly. What? Alex stared at me aghast. Miss Spencer, you want to just let them in? Yes. My fingers tapped lightly across the keyboard, pulling up a script I had pre-written days ago. I don't want to lock them out. I want to invite them into the maze. Then we lock the doors and slaughter them. I was playing him. Using Peter's knowledge of my old coding habits against him, I had intentionally forged a vulnerability on the Thorn firewall, a flaw that looked exactly like the kind of backdoor I used to leave behind for convenience. To anyone else, it looked like a honeypot. But to the arrogant Peter Vance, it would look like a fatal oversight he could exploit. Alex, you monitor Prometheus. The second they enter the data labyrinth, sever their exit nodes. Trap them in an infinite code loop. Yes, ma'am. As for Peter, I stared at the primary attack vector, a chilling light in my eyes. I will be his personal host. It was past midnight. The top floor of the Thorn Tower was empty except for my office. Harrison hadn't left. He sat on the leather sofa, quietly sipping coffee, apparently unconcerned by the impending cyber war. Are you sure about this? He asked. To deal with him, I don't even need Thorn's mainframes, I said, not looking up, my fingers flying. I'm just taking out the trash I left behind years ago. At 3:00 a.m., the assault began. Just as I predicted, the Prometheus hackers dove headfirst into the data labyrinth I built. Within seconds, Alex's team compartmentalized them, trapping them in an endless loop of ghost data. They were paralyzed. Meanwhile, Peter, acting like a greedy thief, slipped right through the fake back door I left open and bypassed security straight into the core database. He began frantically downloading files marked Top Secret. What he didn't know was that every byte he downloaded left a glowing neon trail across my monitor. And he definitely didn't know that the corporate secrets he was downloading were actually poisoned files I had meticulously crafted. He took the bait, I murmured. Harrison put his coffee down and stepped behind my chair, looking at the resolved IP address on the screen. He probably thinks he's won. Probably popping champagne right now. I smiled, and then I hit enter. For the final time. Trace complete. Physical MAC address locked. Game over. I initiated the counter-strike. A massive data flood surged back through the tunnel Peter had opened, slamming directly into his machine. Miles away in a dingy, undisclosed safehouse, Peter was likely staring at the download progress bar with a maniacal grin, imagining the collapse of Thorn Enterprises. But instead, his screen suddenly went black. A line of blood-red text appeared on his monitor, "Got you." Before he could react, every file on his hard drive began wiping itself. The physical drive shrieked, smoked, and fried itself into a brick. Simultaneously, the encrypted comlink he used to contact the Prometheus syndicate auto-compiled their chat logs and financial transactions, emailing the entire evidentiary package straight to the FBI Cyber Division, Interpol. The poisoned files he had downloaded executed a secondary payload packaging his attempt to steal Thorne's IP, along with a flawless chain of custody, sending copies to the Thorne legal department, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. I leaned back in my Herman Miller chair and let out a long breath. With one move, I had crushed Peter's revenge, dismantled an international hacker ring, and secured absolute, undeniable proof of his corporate espionage. There was nowhere left for him to run. Brilliant work. Harrison's voice rumbled from above me, laced with unmistakable admiration. I tilted my head back and met his dark eyes. Under the fluorescent lights, I saw something in his gaze that went deeper than professional respect, something intense and burning. My heart skipped a sudden beat. I quickly looked away, staring back at the dead monitor. "It's not enough," I said quietly. "I want him to lose everything. His reputation, his freedom, his legacy." The executive suite was silent save for the hum of the servers. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City slept a grid of lights beneath the cold starlight. My fingers didn't stop moving. Destroying Peter's hardware and sending the evidence to the feds was the appetizer. The main course was just beginning. "What are you doing now?" Harrison asked, pulling up a chair beside me. "Cleaning the battlefield," I replied simply. In the fraction of a second before I nuked Peter's computer, I used the data backflow to plant a microscopic Trojan into his local network. It was a ghost protocol, undetectable by any commercial antivirus. Through that ghost, I was now bridging directly into Peter's private cloud server. His real secret garden. His cloud uses a triple-layered dynamic encryption. The keys roll over every 10 minutes, I explained, almost talking to myself or perhaps to Harrison. I designed this architecture to protect the Aegis kernel. I never thought he'd use it to hide his own filth. "If you built the lock, you have the key," Harrison said calmly. I closed my eyes, visualizing the data models. My fingers flew across the keyboard so fast they were a blur. The cascading data on the screen was dizzying. Harrison didn't interrupt. He quietly poured me a cup of hot tea and placed it by my hand. The warmth grounded me. I could feel him sitting beside me like an immovable mountain, offering silent support and absolute trust. 3 minutes later. Got it. A green ACCESS granted box popped up. I was inside his private drive. I clicked the first folder. The contents made me clench my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. It was filled with files about me. Photos of me from college, videos of me accepting coding awards, drafts of my PhD thesis. And worse, photos and videos he had secretly taken of me while keeping me locked in the house, showing me bruised, crying, and broken. He was a psychopath. He had kept them as trophies to feed his sick need for control. Fighting down the nausea in my throat, I closed the folder. Harrison noticed my reaction. He reached out, resting a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. He didn't speak, but his strength bled into me. I took a breath and opened the second folder. It was labeled Origin. My eyes widened. It was an encrypted ledger detailing every bribe, kickback, and illegal wire transfer Peter had made to politicians, bankers, and regulators to push Apex Technologies' IPO through. Dates, names, offshore routing numbers, even audio recordings of the deals. He was arrogant enough to keep the guillotine blade hanging over his own neck on a cloud server. "Foolish," Harrison muttered, looking at the screen. "No, not foolish." "Arrogant," I corrected. He thought the encryption system I built was impenetrable. He didn't realize the architect had a master key. I clicked the third folder IP. Inside were all the original source codes and handwritten design notes for the Aegis system. The creation metadata on every single file predated his patent application by 2 full years. This was the irrefutable, bulletproof evidence that he had stolen my life's work. With this, I wouldn't just take my patents back. I would send him to federal prison for massive corporate fraud. Looking at the code that held my blood, sweat, and tears, my eyes burned. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled a cold, merciless smile. Pandora's box was open. I didn't immediately leak it to the press. Calling the police right now was too easy. I wanted him to taste hope before I shoved him into the abyss. I wanted to end his life with a spectacular public funeral. I compressed the evidence, encrypted it, and forwarded the massive file directly to Harrison's private email. "A thank you gift," I said. Harrison looked at his phone. He understood the magnitude of what I had just given him. The political and financial leverage in that ledger was worth 100 times the $2 million he paid me, and I had handed it to him without a second thought. "You trust me that much?" he asked. "You gave me a new life. This is my pledge of allegiance." I looked him in the eye. It was my true alliance with the man who recognized my worth. Harrison looked at me in silence for a long time. Then he smiled, a genuine smile of deep admiration. "All right then," he said. "Let's send him off together." He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. "Set it up. Thorn Enterprises is hosting a gala at the Plaza in 3 days. Invite every major player in New York." He paused, his eyes turning glacial. "The theme is the funeral of Apex Technologies." Peter Vance was finished. The evidence of corporate espionage was indisputable. The next morning, the FBI raided his apartment and dragged him out in handcuffs. His shocked, desperate face was plastered on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. Apex Tech's stock was halted and prepped for liquidation. A multi-billion-dollar tech unicorn turned to ash in days. The internet mob that he had weaponized turned on him with double the ferocity. Domestic abuse, IP theft, corporate fraud, bribery, he was nailed to the cross of public opinion. I thought it was over, but I underestimated the madness of a cornered sociopath. The day after his arrest, Harrison received an emergency call. "What did you say?" Harrison's face turned ashen. It was the first time I had ever seen him lose his composure. He hung up and looked at me, his voice rough with rage. Peter enacted a scorched earth protocol before the FBI got to him. What does that mean? A bad feeling washed over me. He paid the Prometheus Syndicate to launch a blind zero-day ransomware attack on the internal network of New York Central Hospital. Central Hospital. My heart stopped. Mia had been taking therapy sessions there for the past 2 days to deal with the trauma from the kindergarten incident. What is their target? The life support systems for the ICU. Harrison gritted his teeth. Including my grandfather. Harrison's grandfather, the patriarch of the Thorn family, was on a highly sensitive pacemaker and life support rig at Central. Prometheus sent a ransom, demand, hand over Olivia Spencer and the decryption keys to the evidence within 3 hours, or they would overload the medical hardware and turn the hospital into a morgue. It was Peter's final, apocalyptic revenge. If he was going down, he was taking innocent lives with him to make us pay. Panic swept through the Thorn Enterprises boardroom. Several board members, led by Harrison's uncle, Arthur Thorn, a man who had always coveted the CEO seat, stormed into Harrison's office. "Harrison, what the hell are you doing? You're going to let the whole family burn for some woman," Uncle Arthur yelled, pointing a finger. "If the old man dies, the blood is on your hands. Hand the Spencer woman over right now. She's just a CISO. We can hire another one. The old man's life is on the line," they clamored, demanding I be sacrificed. To them, I was just a pawn. I stood in the corner, my blood running cold. This was high society. When crisis struck, their morals folded like cheap paper. Harrison sat behind his desk, enduring their screaming with a face of stone. When they finally ran out of breath, he slowly raised his head. His eyes were dead black. "Are you finished?" he asked quietly. Uncle Arthur swallowed hard, suddenly intimidated. "Harrison, we are thinking about the family." Before he could finish, Harrison opened his desk drawer, pulled out a black Glock 19, and slammed it onto the mahogany desk with a heavy thud. The office went graveyard silent. Everyone froze. Harrison stood up slowly, picked up the gun, and racked the slide. He aimed the cold muzzle directly at his uncle. I will say this exactly once. His voice was practically a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "She is mine. Anyone who tries to touch her dies." Uncle Arthur's face turned paper white and his knees buckled. The board members remembered who they were dealing with. Harrison Thorn wasn't just a CEO. He was the ruthless predator of Wall Street, a man who had metaphorically and perhaps literally spilled blood to build his empire. "Get the hell out of my office." The board members scrambled out like frightened rats. The office was quiet again. I looked at this man standing there with a gun, ready to go to war with his own bloodline to protect me. I owed him a debt I could never repay in this lifetime. But now was not the time for sentiment. I walked up to him, looking him dead in the eye. "I don't need you to protect me with a gun." He frowned. I took the Glock from his hand, flicked the safety on, and set it on the desk. "Because I can handle this myself." I turned toward the door, heading for my battlefield. "Give me 2 hours." My voice was vibrating with absolute confidence. "I'm not just going to save everyone in that hospital. I'm going to teach this Prometheus what a real god looks like. Because in the world of cryptography, I am the only deity." This wasn't a real crisis. Not to me. Peter and Prometheus's little team-up was a script I had already read, but I needed this crisis. I needed it to test loyalties, and I needed it as the stage for my final judgment. Harrison sat in his office, watching my live feed from the server room. Seeing him risk his empire for me had melted the last glacier around my heart. He passed my test. Now it was my turn. I locked myself inside Thorn Enterprises' primary server farm. This was the brain of the company housing the most powerful quantum-capable supercomputers on the eastern seaboard. Miss Spencer, their firewall is military grade. We've tried every brute force and backdoor vector we can't break through, Alex said through my earpiece, sounding defeated. Conventional methods are for mortals, I said, putting on my noise-canceling headphones. To kill a god, you need magic. I didn't attack Prometheus's firewall. That was a waste of time. I was going to pull the plug on their universe. I pulled up the NYC grid maps, power distribution, cellular towers, and subterranean fiber optic cables. Prometheus was smart. They knew IP tracing wouldn't work. They were physically hardwired into a blind node somewhere. My fingers turned into a blur. I became an extension of the supercomputer, sifting through petabytes of data hunting for a single anomalous fluctuation in the city's grid. Time ticked down. The hospital reported that the life support systems were experiencing micro-fluctuations. Panic was setting in. But Harrison just sat in his office watching my screen, saying nothing. He gave me his absolute trust. I would not fail him. Found him. With 10 minutes left on the clock, I locked onto the signal. It was coming from an abandoned weather station in the Catskills, tapping into a decommissioned military fiber line. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, but I had just caved in the ceiling. Alex, initiate Protocol Ragnarok, I commanded. Protocol Ragnarok was the ultimate defense I had secretly built for Thorn. It wasn't a wall, it was a digital black hole. Anyone who entered without authorization would have their computing power instantly cannibalized and assimilated. Copy that. The supercomputers around me hummed like jet engines. Miles away in the Catskills, a blonde hacker, Prometheus himself, was sipping an espresso, grinning at the chaos he was causing at the hospital. He prepared to hit the final execute command, but as his finger grazed the enter key, his monitor flashed blood red. A massive, swirling vortex of black code materialized on his screen, devouring his operating system. Prometheus panicked. He tried to kill his connection, but his keyboard was locked out. He tried to yank the power cord, but the station's grid had been hijacked. He was being reverse-hacked with an algorithm so advanced it looked like alien technology. "Who the fuck are you?" he screamed at his dead monitors. A single elegant line of text typed itself across his screen, the one who judges false gods. Every file on Prometheus's servers, including years of dark web ledgers and illicit contracts, was compressed and forwarded to the NSA. Then I commanded his server's cooling fans to reverse while maxing out the CPU voltage. Boom! The server racks inside the weather station violently detonated, sparking a fire. Simultaneously, at Central Hospital, the monitors beeped steadily. The life support system stabilized. The ransomware evaporated. A catastrophe had been averted with 10 seconds to spare. I took off my headphones and leaned back, exhaling deeply. The server room door opened, and Harrison walked in. The look in his eyes was overwhelming, shock, pride, and an intense burning heat. "It's over," I said. "No," he walked up to me and shook his head. "The best part is about to begin." When I walked out of the server room, the executive floor was in chaos. Uncle Arthur and his cronies were shouting at Harrison's assistant. "If the old man dies, the board will have Harrison's head." Arthur was practically frothing at the mouth. Arthur spotted me and pointed a trembling finger. "You jinx. You have the nerve to show your face. If my father suffers, I'll skin you alive." I didn't even give him the dignity of a response. I checked my Cartier watch, pulled out my phone, dialed the chief of medicine at Central Hospital, and put it on speaker. "Miss Spencer." Thank God the chief's voice blared through the hallway, breathless with relief. "It's a miracle. The systems are back online. The patients are stable. Mr. Thorne Sr. is perfectly fine." The hallway went dead silent. The board members stared at my phone like it was an alien artifact. Uncle Arthur's mouth was hanging open wide enough to catch a fly. Uncle Arthur Harrison's voice came from behind me, cold and sharp. Arthur snapped out of it instantly, plastering on a fake fawning smile. "Harrison, oh thank heavens, I was just so worried." "Wow, miss. Spencer is truly brilliant. A blessing to the Thorne family." The hypocrisy was nauseating. Harrison ignored him entirely. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, which were cold from the hyper-air-conditioned server room. "You worked hard," he murmured softly. We walked past the stunned board members side by side. No one dared utter another word. This battle didn't just cement my place at Thorne Enterprises. It proved to everyone that Harrison Thorne's protection of me was absolute. 3 days later, the Thorne Enterprises Gala was held at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. The grand ballroom was resplendent with crystal chandeliers, champagne, and the absolute elite of New York society. The theme was an open secret, a celebration of my ascension and a public execution of Peter Vance. I wore a custom blood-red Oscar de la Renta gown, walking arm in arm with Harrison. The moment I entered, the room parted. The dress flared like fire, contrasting with my pale skin. I was no longer the cowering waitress or the silent coder. Tonight I was a queen. I scanned the room. In the corner, flanked by 2 federal marshals, was Peter Vance. He looked 10 years older, wearing a crumpled suit and handcuffs. Harrison had pulled strings to have him temporarily transferred here, a cruel, fitting punishment. Peter stared at me with bloodshot eyes filled with hate, regret, and sheer terror. Halfway through the night, Harrison led me to the stage. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison spoke into the microphone. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Tonight I only want to introduce one person, Olivia Spencer, my queen." The applause was thunderous. I took the mic, looking down at the crowd, and finally locked eyes with the pathetic man in handcuffs. 3 years ago, I was stripped of everything. My work was stolen, I was imprisoned, and I lived in terror. My voice echoed clearly through the ballroom. Today, I stand here to tell the man who did that to me, I wrote your code. I built your empire. And today, I tore it down. The room fell into a chilling silence. All eyes turned to Peter. He trembled violently, his face twisted in humiliation. "You bitch!" he shrieked, struggling against the marshals who shoved him back down. "Oh, and Peter," I smiled coldly, snapping my fingers. The massive screens behind me lit up with a presentation titled, "The Crimes of Peter Vance." Slide 1, the Apex Tech cooked books and offshore tax evasion ledgers. Slide 2, the bribery records implicating several politicians who were coincidentally absent from the gala tonight. Slide 3, my original Aegis source code dated 2 years prior to his patent filing. Slide 4, the medical reports, photos of my belt whipped back, and an audio recording playing over the speakers. "You're just a dog I keep. I own you. Try to run again and I'll break your legs and kill that bastard kid of yours," Peter's psychotic voice echoed through the Plaza Hotel. The crowd gasped in collective horror. The tycoons and socialites who used to shake his hand now looked at him like he was a cockroach. Social execution. Absolute, undeniable destruction. "No, it's a deep fake. She's framing me," Peter sobbed, collapsing to his knees. But no one was listening. I walked down the steps and stood over him. "Game over, Peter," I whispered. "Enjoy federal prison." I turned my back on him as the marshals dragged his limp body out of the ballroom. The curtain had fallen. Peter Vance was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His political accomplices were swept up in a massive FBI corruption sting. Apex Technologies went bankrupt, and the Aegis patents were returned to me. Thorne Enterprises bought the commercial rights to Aegis for an astronomical sum, and I became the youngest equity partner in the firm's history. I moved out of the safe house and into a 5,000 square foot penthouse in Tribeca overlooking the Hudson River. Mia's autism rapidly improved with top-tier therapy and a safe environment. She started smiling again. She still called Harrison uncle, but he was already the father she never had. He played blocks with her, read her bedtime stories, and clumsily tried to cook pancakes on Sunday mornings. One evening after Mia had gone to sleep, Harrison and I sat on the terrace drinking Cabernet and looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about whether this is all a dream," I whispered. He reached over and covered my hand with his. It was warm, large, and anchoring. "It's not a dream, and as long as I'm here, you're never going back to the dark." I looked at him. The icy billionaire was gone. In his eyes, there was only intense, undeniable devotion. "Live," he said, using my name like a vow. "I backed you because you were a weapon, but now I want to invest in the rest of your life." After the hell I went through with Peter, my heart had been locked in a vault. But Harrison had been the one to slowly, patiently dismantle the walls. Half a year later, using the Aegis architecture, I founded my own cybersecurity firm, Valkyrie Security. Thorne Enterprises was my lead angel investor. At the launch event, I stood on stage in a crisp white suit. Harrison sat in the front row, holding a cheering Mia in his lap. Looking at them, I realized this was what true freedom and happiness felt like. I wasn't someone's shadow anymore. I was Olivia Spencer. Backstage after the event, Harrison didn't offer me corporate congratulations. Instead, he pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a flawless, radiant-cut diamond ring. Olivia, he dropped to one knee, looking up at me with a rare, nervous smile. You said you had the master key to your own locks. You've locked my heart up entirely. Will you use this to open yours? I looked at this man, the ruthless titan of Wall Street, currently sweating bullets, and I couldn't help but laugh. The tears that fell were tears of pure joy. I held out my left hand. He slid the ring onto my finger. Mr. Thorne, I smiled, looking into his eyes. Here's to a prosperous partnership. He froze for a second, then broke into a brilliant smile. He stood up and pulled me into a fierce, encompassing embrace. A prosperous partnership, Mrs. Thorne. Outside, the New York sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the city. A new dawn had broken, and our story had just begun.